Pharmacy aseptic compounding services covers the whole gamut of services which provide medicine specifically tailored to the needs of individual patients. And the subject we're really interested in today and what we'll be talking about is actually aseptic compounding. So that's all about the preparation of doses of injectable medicines for patients, principally in oncology, so that's anti-cancer medicines and parenteral nutrition. And there's a whole lot of other stuff in there, but those are the two big groups of products that are impacted by this. Over at least the last 25 years, starting in about 1994, I suppose, there's been a steadily and consistently growing awareness that aseptic compounding poses a whole range of challenges. It's inherently a high-risk activity because it involves medicines which are injected into patients, many of whom have compromised immune systems. So there's a big issue about microbiological infection risk, contamination and infection risks. There's a big issue about the drugs themselves, in as much as they tend to have low therapeutic ratios, so they're potentially toxic, and you need to get the dose right, and all to do with the administration of those doses right, otherwise you're putting patient safety at risk. And I guess also that the demand for doses prepared in this way has grown steadily over the last 25 years, and the data that we'll talk about this morning in our presentation shows that at the moment demand is growing somewhere in the region of 5% plus, probably 5 to 10% a year, and that's largely in the context of services which have not developed in terms of their capacity or the facilities at anything like the same rate. So we find ourselves today in a situation where demand is threatening to exceed our capacity to supply these medicines to patients. We need to plan better. We need to have a much better view over the horizon than perhaps we've had in the past of what's coming our way, so that we can plan our services accordingly. We need to be able to manage our services more effectively, and there's a whole raft of issues in there. I think personally one of the key issues, it was identified in our review, and I think it's becoming ever more important, is that in the past, in my view, pharmacy aseptic compounding services have been seen as a bit of an add-on, if you like, almost optional extra at the end of a long and complex care pathway. And so they haven't been planned, there isn't an awareness of them in the same way as there is about planning of most of the rest of, let's say, an oncology chemotherapy service. And I think one of the key changes that we have to pursue, we have to make in the future, is that aseptic compounding services have to be seen as an inherent, integral and indivisible part of a clinical service pathway, and they have to be planned and resourced accordingly. Practice across the world varies very, very considerably. And I think that's one of the issues. There are lots of lessons we can all learn from one another. On the other hand, we're also working in quite different healthcare environments, different funding drivers, different cost and funding drivers, which I think is really important, both for the medicines themselves and for the way in which pharmacy services within health services themselves are funded, which leads maybe to different patient expectations, different geographies, which impacts on logistics and configuration of these services. So there are lots of differences, but at the same time, I think the overall patterns, which are that the need for aseptically compounded drug doses is increasing across the board. The increase in the number of treatments which need those services to back them up is also very similar across the board. And we have broadly similar challenges in the way of disease patterns and the need for these treatments in the first place. So whilst there are a lot of similarities, there are also a lot of differences. The more granular you get, the more differences there are, but there are undoubtedly, I believe, a lot of lessons that we can learn and principles that must apply to some degree across the system. And that's really what we hope to achieve today, is to encourage everybody to be thinking along the same lines. And if we share knowledge and experience and ideas, then hopefully it'll help us all to crack these issues in our local environments in future.